By the early 1940s, the Royal Air Force was faced with a harsh calculation. Daylight bombing raids were causing losses that simply couldn't be sustained. To keep up the offensive, bomber crews had to leave the daylight behind and take their chances in the hostile pitch-black skies over occupied Europe. The aircraft chosen to spearhead this nighttime campaign was the twin-engine Avro Manchester. However, its success hinged on the experimental 24-cylinder Rolls-Royce Vulture engine. The Vulture proved to be a liability. Mechanical failures were frequent, often leading to catastrophic engine fires mid-flight that left crews trapped inside a plummeting aircraft. With around 2/3 of the fleet eventually written off due to accidents or combat, the Manchester was a failure. Britain's main weapon for surviving the night was, in effect, destroying itself before it could even reach its target. Realising that the Vulture's problems were probably beyond repair, Avro's chief designer Roy Chadwick changed tack. In mid-1940, he began a rapid redesign that would do away with the twin-engine configuration altogether. Chadwick increased the wingspan to fit 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 engines. These were tried and tested, dependable engines already being mass-produced for the RAF's fighter fleet. In January 1941, the prototype Lancaster took to the skies. It showed immediate improvements in handling and reliability, marking the successful transformation of the failed Manchester into a 4-engine heavy bomber. The mechanical crisis had been resolved, but this new airframe now faced a far greater challenge, navigating and surviving the heavily defended airspace of the Third Reich. When the Lancaster entered frontline service in 1942, its lifting capacity immediately set it apart from its contemporaries. This was thanks to a particular structural feature, a 33-foot continuous bomb bay designed without any transverse crossmembers to obstruct the interior. This open bay allowed the Lancaster to carry the largest munitions in the RAF arsenal, including heavy cylindrical cookies and thousands of smaller incendiaries. This unique payload flexibility made the Lancaster the definitive tool for the RAF's nighttime area bombing strategy. However, an unrivaled payload was only useful if the crew could find a specific industrial complex in complete darkness. Flying the Lancaster meant spending hours inside a freezing, unpressurized metal tube. To the 7-man crew, the physical environment was as hostile as the enemy. Early in the war, raids often missed their targets because visual navigation over a blacked-out continent was almost impossible for ordinary crews. The answer was Oboe. This system used 2 distinct radio pulses from ground stations in England that intersected at a precise geographic location. Elite Pathfinder squadrons used this electronic convergence to drop coloured target flares, providing a visual guide for the bomber stream that followed. By combining heavy payloads with radio-guided tracking, the Lancaster stream could now operate with a level of coordination that the darkness had previously made impossible. But the darkness was not empty. It was filled with radar-equipped German night fighters designed to hunt the bomber stream. To survive an interception, pilots used the Corkscrew, a violent, coordinated sequence of diving and rolling manoeuvres designed to break an attacker's radar lock. These plunging turns required constant high-pressure communication between the pilot and the gunners, who had to track an unseen threat in absolute darkness. The Lancaster, however, had a specific defensive weakness. To maximise speed and reduce weight, it was built without a ventral or belly gun turret. German night fighters exploited this. Using upward-firing Schragmusik cannons, they would slide directly underneath the bomber and fire into the fuel-rich wing routes. Each sortie became a test of airmanship, where survival often depended on throwing a 30-ton heavy bomber through the sky with the aggression of a fighter plane. In May 1943, the Lancaster faced its most technically demanding application during Operation Chastise, the raid on the Ruhr dams. The aircraft were radically modified, stripping away defensive armour to accommodate a specialised bouncing bomb designed by Barnes-Wallis. The mission required crews to fly at an exact altitude of 60 feet above the water in near total darkness to ensure the weapon functioned correctly. This diagram shows the mechanical solution. 2 spotlights were angled so their beams would only intersect on the water surface when the aircraft was at precisely the correct height. The attack runs require pilots to maintain this spotlight convergence at high speeds while under heavy fire from anti-aircraft batteries on the dam walls. The raid's success demonstrated the Lancaster could be adapted for highly specialised, high-risk missions that were beyond the capability of any other Allied bomber. By late 1943, the Lancaster had firmly established itself as the primary heavy bomber of RAF Bomber Command. The airframe had successfully transitioned from a flawed twin-engine prototype into a 4-engine platform defined by its mechanical reliability and immense lifting power. Over its service life, the Lancaster fleet delivered the majority of the tonnage dropped by the RAF, a statistical output that dwarfed its predecessors. As the Allies prepared for D-Day, they needed to dismantle German transport and industrial infrastructure before a single soldier set foot on the beach. Maintaining these aircraft demanded a vast logistical operation. For every Lancaster in the sky, a dedicated network of ground crews, fuel tankers and supply vehicles filled the airfields of eastern England. This was the second front, a campaign waged miles above the earth that demanded a huge commitment of industrial resources and human lives. The aircraft was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. These provided the reliability and power required to carry heavy loads over the long distances to targets in Germany and occupied Europe. This power supported a cavernous 33-foot bomb bay. This unobstructed space enabled the Lancaster to carry specialised ordnance that no other Allied bomber could accommodate. Managing this machine required a crew of 7. Each man had a specific, highly technical role, from the flight engineer seated next to the pilot to the gunners in the turrets. Despite the aircraft's complexity, the men flying them were often barely out of their teens. The average age of a Lancaster crew member was 22. To step inside this assembly of metal and fuel was to accept a role defined by physical discomfort, extreme cold, and constant enemy fire. In late 1944, the Lancaster's capabilities were utilised to strike targets that had previously been considered indestructible. This era saw the introduction of Barnes-Wallis's earthquake bombs, the 12,000-pound Tallboy and the 22,000-pound Grand Slam, the largest bombs used during the war. In November 1944, Lancasters used Tallboys to hunt the German battleship Tirpitz. After multiple attempts, the ship was finally capsized in a Norwegian fjord. By March 1945, the 22,000-pound Grand Slam was deployed against the Bielefeld viaduct. The kinetic energy of the impact brought down the massive brick spans, cutting off a primary German supply line. These victories disrupted the movement of German troops and naval assets, demonstrating the aircraft's capacity to deliver specialised highway ordnance against reinforced targets. But these tactical successes were balanced against a harsh statistical reality for the men of Bomber Command. This graph plots survival probability over a 30-mission tour. With a 5% loss rate per sortie, the odds of finishing were very low. The average Lancaster was lost after just 21 missions, leaving crews 9 missions short. For the airmen, the war was a series of nights where they were required to board their aircraft, knowing the survival rates were stacked against them. When a Lancaster sustained fatal damage from flak or night fighters, the crew entered a new struggle, the race to exit the aircraft. The interior was cramped and dark. To reach an exit, crews had to move through narrow passageways while wearing bulky flight suits and parachutes. The Lancaster's escape hatches were notoriously small. In a spinning, damaged aircraft, these exits were often physically impossible to reach or use. This is reflected in the survival data. While nearly half of B-17 crews survived a shoot-down by bailing out, only 12.5% of Lancaster crews successfully escaped their aircraft. The same design that maximised payload capacity left the crew with few options for escape once the airframe was compromised. By the spring of 1945, the German military was collapsing as Allied forces advanced from both the east and west. During Operation Manna, the Lancaster's role shifted. Instead of bombs, crews flew at low altitude to drop food supplies to starving civilians in the occupied Netherlands. This change in mission brought a sense of relief to the surviving airmen. For the first time, their aircraft were being used for humanitarian relief and to bring home liberated prisoners of war. This final period provided a quiet conclusion to years of high-altitude warfare for the crews who had survived the statistics. The final counts illustrate the scale of the effort. Lancasters flew more than 156,000 sorties and dropped 608,612 tons of high explosives and incendiaries. The cost to secure this advantage was the lives of 55,573 airmen from Bomber Command. These men were required to maintain their duty night after night, regardless of the odds or the attrition rates of their squadrons. These 7 faces represent the generation that flew these machines, accepting the personal cost of the strategic air war. The Lancaster was the primary platform for the RAF strategic offensive, a machine whose contribution to the war effort was paid for by the sacrifice of the crews who flew it. The end of hostilities in 1945 left the Royal Air Force with a sudden surplus of heavy bombers. Thousands of aircraft built for a specific mission were now effectively obsolete. The transition to peacetime roles began immediately. After the surrender, the fleet was repurposed for repatriation. Lancasters ferried thousands of troops and prisoners of war back to the British Isles, providing a rapid transport link across a fractured continent. While these humanitarian missions made use of the existing fleet, they also highlighted a major post-war challenge. The world needed a dedicated transport infrastructure, and the only high-capacity tool available was a bomber. To meet the demand for long-range transport, manufacturers in Canada and Britain began a program to physically convert the Lancaster into a civilian carrier. Conversion required a complete stripping of the bomber's defences. The nose and tail gun turrets were removed and replaced with elongated, streamlined metal fairings that smoothed the aircraft's silhouette. The 33-foot bomb bay was cleared of its hardware. In its place, engineers installed 2 400-gallon fuel tanks, extending the aircraft's range for intercontinental flight. This new variant, the Avro Lancastrian, traded defensive armament for speed and range, effectively becoming a high-speed courier for the post-war era. The type entered service with BOAC, carrying mail and VIP passengers on routes that had previously been reserved for military operations. The modification was successful in terms of performance. A Lancastrian managed to fly 13,500 miles from England to New Zealand in just over 3 days, maintaining an average speed of 220 miles per hour. However, the narrow fuselage, originally designed to carry dense bombs rather than bulky passengers, limited the cabin to only 9 feet. It remained a specialised tool for high-priority cargo and government officials. As the aerospace industry looked towards gas turbine engines, the Lancastrian took on a new role. Testing these early jet engines in mid-air was dangerous, as flame-outs and mechanical failures were common. The Lancastrian was an ideal testbed because its sturdy 4-engine frame could support the weight of heavy instrumentation while maintaining flight stability. Engineers replaced the outer Merlin piston engines with experimental turbojets. This hybrid configuration allowed them to evaluate new propulsion technology in a controlled airborne environment. This provided a critical safety margin. If the experimental jets failed, the pilot could feather the turbines and fly home on the power of the 2 inboard Merlin engines. It also required 2 distinct fuel systems. Kerosene for the jets was stored in the outer wing tanks, while the rest of the aircraft ran on standard aviation petrol. These flying laboratories made history. In 1946, a Neen-engined Lancastrian completed the first international all-jet passenger flight from London to Paris. In Canada, the airframe's adaptability allowed it to remain in service for decades. The RCAF utilised Lancasters for maritime patrol, Arctic reconnaissance and search and rescue missions into the early 1960s. By acting as a testbed, the Lancastrian provided the flight data and reliability benchmarks that proved jet engines were viable for civilian use. This research validated the engines that would eventually power the first generation of purpose-built jet airliners. Over the following decades, the thousands of aircraft that once made up the Lancaster and Lancastrian fleet began to disappear through scrapping and accidents. Of the 7,377 Lancasters built during the war, only 17 complete airframes are known to exist today. The number of those still capable of flight is even smaller. Only 2 Lancasters in the entire world remain in airworthy condition. These flying survivors, such as Canada's FM213, are maintained through intensive preservation efforts and specialised engineering to keep their 1940s technology operational. Decades of service and exposure to the elements nearly erase the type from history, leaving these few remaining aircraft as the final physical evidence of the lineage. Keeping these survivors in the air requires a global network of parts and funding. Major overhauls take years to complete, ensuring that the structural integrity of the wings and engines is maintained for public display. The remaining static examples serve a different purpose, preserving the various configurations of the aircraft, from specialised bombers to maritime patrol craft. When these 4 engines roar to life today, they represent a machine that spent its post-war career testing the very technologies that would eventually make the heavy bomber obsolete. The Lancaster's enduring legacy is found in its adaptability. It served as the necessary bridge between the era of piston-driven combat and the development of the modern jet age.